There's a version of a Friday night that looks like this. Everyone else seems to have somewhere to be, a dinner, a party, a group chat buzzing with plans, and you're home, quiet. And the strange thing, the thing you don't say out loud, is that it feels like relief. Not loneliness, relief. But then the voice comes, the one that asks if something is wrong with you, why you don't want more, why other people seem to crave connection the way you crave stillness. What if that voice is wrong? What if the way you're wired isn't a flaw in your design, but a design for a different kind of survival? Because there is a real psychological reason some people feel safest when they're alone, and it goes much deeper than introversion, much deeper than shyness. It has to do with how your nervous system learned, very early, what safety actually feels like. Psychologists call this an internal working model. It's the invisible blueprint your brain built in childhood based on what relationships felt like. When you were young, your brain was watching, constantly. Was connection safe? Was it predictable? Did people stay or did they leave? Did they soothe you or did they overwhelm you? Whatever it learned, it locked in, not as a memory, as a reflex. And for some people, that reflex learned something very specific. People are unpredictable. Solitude is not. And the nervous system, which is always optimizing for safety, began to treat aloneness as a kind of shelter. This isn't a broken response. This is your brain doing exactly what brains do. It found a pattern that reduced uncertainty, and it held on. The technical name for the attachment style that often develops from this is avoidant attachment. But don't let the label fool you. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means your brain learned to regulate feelings internally, because depending on someone else to regulate them felt too risky. You feel things deeply. You just learned not to show it. And over time, you may have stopped showing it even to yourself. Here's where it gets more complex. The brain has a threat detection system called the amygdala. Its job is to scan the environment for danger and trigger a protective response before you've even consciously registered the threat. For people who feel safer alone, this system has been quietly conditioned, often no fault of anyone, to associate closeness with vulnerability, and vulnerability with pain. So when intimacy gets too close, or noise gets too loud, or social demands pile up, the amygdala fires, and your body responds before your mind can reason. You pull back, you go quiet, you find a reason to be somewhere else or to be alone. And the moment you get there, the tension drops. The nervous system exhales. That exhale is the thing people don't understand about you. To them, choosing solitude looks like rejection. To your nervous system, it's recovery. And here's the part that's hard to hear. That pattern, the quiet retreat, the self-sufficiency, the emotional distance, it protected you once. But protection that outlives its original purpose becomes a wall. One of the most fascinating examples of this in history is Nikola Tesla, the inventor who gave the world alternating current, wireless energy concepts, and dozens of innovations that changed civilization. By the end of his life, he was living alone in a New York hotel room, feeding pigeons, refusing visitors, with a deep and documented aversion to human touch. Tesla wasn't simply eccentric. What history records is a man who, from very early in his life, found the company of ideas more reliable than the company of people. He described his mind as a place he preferred to his social environment. He formed intense intellectual connections with very few people, and when those connections broke, as with Thomas Edison, he processed the loss largely in private and continued alone. What did this cost him? Significantly. Tesla died without the recognition, financial support, or collaborative relationships that may have brought his later inventions to life. Several of his greatest concepts remained unrealized, partly because he could not or would not maintain the social architecture that turns ideas into supported projects.
His brain, brilliant as it was, had optimized for solitary genius over relational sustainability, and in doing so, he achieved extraordinary things and quietly lost others. The psychological lens here is not to pity Tesla, it's to recognize the trade-off. When a mind learns to find safety in ideas and independence rather than people, it can go very far alone, but it may also unknowingly close doors that only open from the other side. What does his experience tell you? That the same internal world that protects you can also limit what becomes possible when you're ready for more. And you are not flawed for this. That has to be said clearly. People who prefer solitude are not damaged. They are often among the most observant, the most internally rich, the most quietly perceptive people in any room. The brain that learned to self-regulate didn't fail. It adapted. That's actually a form of emotional intelligence that many people spend years trying to develop.
But here's the honest paradox. The trait that gave you depth can also keep you at the surface with others. The wall built for protection becomes the thing that keeps warmth out. And there's a quiet cost to that. Not a dramatic one, just the slow accumulation of connection never quite started, conversations never deepened, people who might have stayed given the chance. If that landed somewhere specific in you, that's worth sitting with. Now, this is not about forcing yourself into the extrovert's world. That's not the answer. The answer is something smaller and more precise. The first principle is this. Start to notice the difference between solitude you chose and solitude you defaulted to. They feel similar in the moment, but one is rest and one is avoidance. The brain doesn't always tell you which one is happening. You have to learn to ask. The second principle is this. Small, low-stakes relational moments are not a threat. The nervous system doesn't believe that yet, but it can learn. Not through grand gestures of vulnerability, but through tiny ones. A conversation held a little longer than usual. A feeling expressed instead of swallowed. The nervous system learns safety the same way it learned danger, through repetition. It just needs different data. The third principle is this. Your need for solitude is not the problem. The relationship you have with your need for solitude might be. If being alone is a choice, it's healthy. If it's a reflex you can't question, it's worth examining, not to eliminate it, but to understand it. And the fourth, the goal is not to need people less. The goal is to be a little less afraid of what needing them might cost. Because the original calculation was made by a younger version of you with the information available at the time. You have more information now. Here's the mental model that ties all of this together. Imagine your nervous system as a thermostat calibrated in early life to a certain emotional temperature. It will always try to return to that temperature, not because it's the best temperature, but because it's the known one. Your preference for solitude is that thermostat, keeping you at a familiar setting. The work isn't to break the thermostat, it's to slowly, carefully reset what feels like home. Tesla never reset his thermostat. He lived brilliantly and alone in the hotel room of his own mind. That was his life, and it produced wonders. But you are still writing yours. You don't have to choose between depth and connection, between solitude and relationship. The psychology shows you that the preference for aloneness came from somewhere real, responded to something real, and served a real purpose. It doesn't have to be permanent. You are not too much for people. You are not broken by silence. You are someone whose nervous system learned a very specific grammar for safety. And like any language, you can learn another alongside it without losing the first. If something in this video felt like a quiet recognition of something you've carried for a while, there's more to understand. The mind that learned to protect itself so well is the same mind capable of extraordinary things, including, when it's ready, letting someone else in.
That's not weakness, that's the next layer.